Hello and welcome to this podcast exploring the role of Ombuds services in resolving organisational conflict and the key skills used by Ombuds to facilitate resolution in what can often be very difficult problems to resolve. My name is James South and I'm CEDR's Chief Executive and a mediator for over 28 years. I'm also a lead trainer on CEDR's Mediator Skills Training Program. One of the pleasures of my job, and having been at CEDR for many years, is I get to see people who have come on the mediator skills training go out and apply that training in practice in many different ways. I love catching up with people who I've met on the course and hearing how they are applying the skills in practice in different contexts. And one of the ways that I've seen this happen over the years is those working in Ombuds services in many international public institutions, coming on our program and then going in to use these skills in resolving complex organizational conflict. So one of the purposes of today's podcast is to explore the key role that mediator skills plays in helping Ombuds resolve organizational conflict. And also perhaps some of the differences between standard mediation and the commercial context and the way it's applied, the skill set is applied in the Ombuds context. In addition, in recent years, CEDR have seen an increase in private sector organisations also looking to Ombuds type services to resolve internal conflicts. So the second purpose of this discussion is to explore what learning from the international public institutions that have been doing this perhaps for longer can be taken into private sector Ombuds services when they are being set up. And to have this conversation, we are very privileged to have four speakers who have lots of collective experience operating as Ombuds or setting up Ombuds services. So to start off, can I ask you all to introduce yourselves, broadly your organisations that you represent, and how the Ombuds services work, just briefly in your particular organisations and specifically your roles within that. And perhaps if I could ask Youssoupha for you to make a start.
Very happy to be part of this postcard because I've been trained by CEDR and many years ago. Also happy to be here with colleagues I've been working with for so many years and with new ones. My name is Youssoupha. I'm the Ombudsman for UNHCR. Previously, I was Ombudsman in the UN Secretariat. Ombudsing in the UN, relatively new, a little bit more than 20 years ago, when the UN General Assembly decided to create a UN system of justice. You have to understand the ombudsing in the UN as part of the UN system of justice. UN staff, because of the privilege they have, they cannot take issues related to the UN to the local courts. So the organization decided to create a system of justice with tribunals and also the Ombuds Service. The Ombuds Service was created after the formal system was created with the courts. It was created with the recognition that there was quite a bit of escalation of cases to the court, and that was taking some time, some resources, while they could have been resolved informally, with sometimes more benefit than when it goes to the court. And that's where the General Assembly created the United Nations Office of Mediation and Ombuds Services with three components. One pillar being the Secretariat, the second pillar being the funds and program, where James is now, and the third one, UNHCR. And those three pillars, when the system was created, there was this intention to decentralize them, to make them at the field, because to play the preventive role, to de-escalate, to prevent cases to escalate too much to the court. So that's how the system was created, and that's how the UNHCR Ombudsman Office was created. And I'm being very privileged to be the first professional ombudsman recruited by UNHCR, because in many organizations, they was using ombuds colleagues who are about to retire to perform the job. But more and more, Now it's becoming a more professionalized function where people are recruited based on the profession, but not based on their previous experience in organization and when that they are going to retire. So that, in a nutshell, what is it, how it was created? So we, being part of the UN system of justice, we facilitate the informal resolution of workplace disputes and conflict, mostly when it's come to administrative decisions. And because it's come to administrative decisions, where that resolution can go through mediation, the General Assembly also decided that it would be good to have a neutral person, a neutral entity to facilitate the resolution through mediation. Because most of the part of the organization are administration. When they are in conflict with the staff, someone who are independent from administration and who have this neutrality and impartiality could facilitate the resolution. And that's how the mediator also came to the same system and being part of the Ombuds Service, because it's all about conflict resolution.
Right, thank you. There's a lot of points there. I guess we'll pick up in due course. Thank you for that, Youssoupha. Judith.
Thank you, James, and truly an honor to be here with you all, with colleagues. I was not trained by CEDR, but I was a mediator in 2001, trained by the Institute of Mediation and Conflict Resolution in the Bronx. I was a certified mediator and part of the community mediation there, dealing with very complicated cases from racism to all kinds of things, very deep issues. And I was trained in the transformative mediation style in a way. This was a great start, I would say. And many years, 10 years later, I got the first paid job. This was a pro bono work in an ombudsman office, and that's where James works now with the UN funds and programs. And there I have to also mention that great mentors, not just from the office, but across other colleagues. I would like to mention here James Lee, Mary Rowe, later through my organization development studies, John Carter from the Gestalt OSD, and so many others. I think this is the kind of profession where we really need the mentors, the guidance throughout the years, that we grow because we are part of this network. And here also we are in the same city with Youssoupha now, so that's wonderful. Currently, this is the second time I set up an ombuds office. The first one was at the Barnard College in New York. And now I work at the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. So this is a huge organization in one sense, but I only work with the Secretariat, which has globally 2,500 staff. I say only because the larger network with 191 Red Cross and Red Crescent societies have about 15 million volunteers and 500,000 staff globally. So anytime there is a natural disaster, which happens due to climate change, we know every day, everywhere, more and more, nobody is exempt from that, sadly. This is mainly one of the main work which IFRC helps, whether it need to coordinate globally, if it's a huge catastrophe, or sometimes it's pandemic, or another business that we do is the National Society Development, which is very similar to my previous background. After I was a lawyer, I became an OD, Organization Development Consultant myself. So it's really how to be a helpful helper. And that's very similar to the work as an ombuds and mediator. And also some of the fundamental principles of the Red Crescent movement, which again, this organization is different from the ICRC, which is more branded, more well-known in a way as an organization, is, for example, impartiality, voluntary service, independence. So it's really very nice to be here. And what I would say is just help the helpers. This is in a nutshell what I do here. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Judith. Perhaps James, bringing in you now.
Sure, thanks very much, James, this opportunity. I did train at CEDR specifically with James in Japan. Maybe, James, was that the first CEDR course in Japan?
Yeah, I think it was, yes.
Yeah, great. So that's my connection to James. We've been in touch since those happy days. So I, as Youssoupha mentioned, I work for the United Nations. He explained very well the structure of Ombuds Services. I'm specifically the Ombuds specialist for the funds and programs with responsibility for Africa and for parts of the Middle East. I've been in the role now for a little bit over a year, and I'm enjoying it very much.
Great, thanks, James. And finally, moving aside from the public institutions to a private organisation, Estelle, talk a little bit about Sanofi and your role within it.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm Estelle Ghyselinck. I'm based in Paris, and I work for Sanofi, so a multinational healthcare company in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm part of the department Ethics and Business Integrity. And I joined Sanofi a year ago, a little bit over a year ago. And my department is called Organisational Justice. Our basic mission is to create a safe, fair, transparent environment for employees to speak up. And in Sanofi, what we believe is speak up is not only reporting misconduct or issues, but it's larger than this. It's about employees expressing their opinions, giving feedback, sharing ideas without any fear of judgment or retaliation. And as part of this, I'm in charge, obviously, of the Speak Up initiatives, and I'm also in charge of investigations for a region covering so Africa, Middle East, Asia, and JPAC. And I have another role, which is the subject of the discussion today, which is the Ombuds Office. So we decided to create an additional channel for employees to speak up, which is this Ombuds Office. And really, it's just giving one more option for employees to speak up in a trusted, confidential, informal, impartial manner. And we launched this program a bit more than 2 weeks ago. So it's a very recent one. I've been working on it for almost a year since I joined, in shaping the program, selecting the people, and training them with CEDR on conflict resolution and mediation skills, obviously. And I'm very happy to now have a team of 20 trained, accredited ombuds to work on our internal organizational issues and conflicts. So I'm very excited to be part of the discussion today, because as you understand, this is also very new for me. I was coming from a more financial background. I was a consultant in an auditing and consulting firm. I was specialized in investigations, corruption, fraud-related investigations. So quite different from my role as a global ombuds lead. So I'm very keen on learning from the other participants today. So I'm happy to be able to share my little experience in setting up an ombuds office as well in the private sector.
Great, thank you all, and thank you all for making time to have this conversation, on which I know is a very busy time for you all. Perhaps maybe to start the conversation, maybe just take it a very big picture and take it from the organization's view. And you've touched on some of it, but maybe to expand on it. What are the reasons that an organization, looks at investing its time, its money, its resources into setting up an ombuds service? Well, what are the drivers from an organization's point of view to do that? Youssoupha, maybe do you want to again lead us off? And I think you did touch on it a bit early, but maybe expand on it a little.
Well, I think there are at least two reasons. One is a business case, because resolving informal issues is good for the organization, because you decrease litigations, you lower the costs. but also you create more sense of justice and belonging for people to increase their performance. There's also a business case because member states who are donors are also asking for good governance. And good governance means also you have all the structures for people to be able to navigate their issues. But there's also a social case, because if you look at the mandate of the Ombuds services in the UN, there's one specific things that is very particular to how it was designed, is fairness. When the ombuds cannot advocate for anything, they still can advocate for fairness. Because the UN Charter talks about dignity. If there's one mandate that is implemented by all the parties, all the components of the organization, regardless of their specific mandate, is about dignity. And that one comes to the Ombuds service, really, and it's come to fairness, and it's come to ensuring that people are treated in a dignified manner. And processes, there's a concern for fairness. You create the social justice, That's why I'm saying that that's a social case, but also the business case. Even though I believe that the business case is bigger, but the social case, because it's linked to the charter, make it very important. In that sense, for instance, when I was in Secretariat, I was coordinating the UN dialogue on racism. That was after the George Floyd case in the US. The organization went to the big project that led today to appointing a special advisor of the SG that works only on anti-racism. And that person is a former ombudsman from South Africa. So you can see all the social case about dignity, about fairness, related mostly to the Ombuds services.
Right. And Estelle, what about from Sanofi's point of view in terms of the thinking behind setting it up? What were the drivers to do that?
So I think the drivers are the ones that were shared today. It's about giving more trust in the organization and providing that safe place for employees to go. We had many existing channels of formal reporting. People could go to HR, which we call people and culture in our organization. They could go to ethics and business integrity colleagues. They could go to legal, to their managers. They could go anonymously to the helpline. But we felt that something may be missing, or something could be added in giving that space where things are informal, that they have the confidence that they will talk to someone who is completely independent from their local country or management. And that's the way we decided to set up the Ombuds office, if having people from different countries, that we select based on their skills and motivation for this role, that we're going to train and will be fully skilled to work on that, and will be really independent from the country that the employee has an issue on. And still having the knowledge of the organization, the issues that potentially happen in our organization, but from a completely independent manner. So that's why we structured it this way. And also what we felt is, sometimes from an investigation standpoint, when I look at some cases, we could notice that some cases should have been resolved earlier, or could have been resolved way earlier, and would not have escalated to the point they were escalated, if we had this type of service available with an ombuds. So we could see a lot of things coming from little conflicts within the organization, who then escalated to something closer to harassment or discrimination or very complex situations. And I think that was also the idea of creating this Ombuds office.
Right, thanks. And finally, James, do you have anything to add just in terms of the big picture, why institutions are setting up these services?
Sure. I really like the way that Judith and Youssoupha put it with the social aspect and the commercial aspect. The social aspect resonates with me in particular. Maybe just a word or two more about the commercial case for the Ombuds office, since we're thinking about private Ombuds offices as well. As Judith said, it's really difficult to measure the cost of conflict, but some have tried to do it. And it's estimated that in the United States, it might cost organizations annually around $359 billion US. That's in terms of things like litigation, reduced productivity, turnover rate, absenteeism, and importantly also the amount of time that management spends in trying to manage and resolve disputes. And there's been research showing that anywhere between 20 and 45% of management's time is spent in some way managing conflict. And so that just represents an enormous cost and an enormous opportunity for Ombuds offices.
Yeah, CEDR did a survey some years ago on the cost of conflict, and 30% of managers said they'd rather jump out of a plane than deal with conflict. So it shows you that, conflict avoidance is a major problem in this area, of managers. And the benefit of an Ombuds service is that you have trained professionals like yourselves who like managing conflict or are able to manage conflict. So that's one aspect. Maybe could we just turn, Judith, maybe you could pick this up. You mentioned already how it's difficult to measure, but what measures do you use within the organization broadly to say, oh, this process is successful?
Yeah, well, this is the probably the most difficult one to put the numbers, because yes, in a way, you can imagine we have multiple stakeholders. So as Mary Rowe, who wrote probably most of the articles, published most of the articles in the field, has one article where she is explaining why is it nearly impossible to have an objective measurement. And it's true, because if you look at, sometimes we call, so how we call the person who comes to us, we call them visitors, we don't call them clients. So in terms of what is success for a visitor might not be the success for the management or the leadership. So we have so different, in a way, looking at these multiple stakeholders. The one thing for sure, which is only an anecdotal evidence, but it comes up all the time. I really don't know where else I could have gone if this office wouldn't have existed. So this we hear 100% all the time, and that could be, you could say, okay, this might be a good sign that this is successful, because at the end of the day, just to make sure that we can resolve internally within the organization, sometimes we get referrals from the formal system. We are not in a very organized way, an integrated conflict management system, but in an not organized way we are. So it's very helpful to think about it also in that sense, because at any given time, the whole idea of the integrated conflict management system is that we have multiple entry points, and we don't want to decide for whether it's a senior leader, a staff, or anyone who wants to either share some concern, or could be that it's an idea that they have a recommendation for change, or it could be a number of different issues, but we don't want to limit them that you have to go first here and there. So they could start anywhere, and the doors are open, and one of the doors is for the ombudsperson's office. So that in itself, I think, is in a way to make sure that it's successful, that everyone at any point feels comfortable to just raise the issue as early as possible. So that's the goal. We can see in certain issues, whether it is a toxic work environment or bullying, or we can label these things in different ways, but we can see that it affects the entire team. So often we might lose because we just focus on two people, the one who feels like the target or the alleged perpetrator, but it's not about the two people. So as soon as we would do a kind of assessment on the entire team, whether it's about psychological safety or anything else, we can definitely improve the productivity, the whole effectiveness. So there are different ways. Often what I hear from the visitors, even if the actual case did not get resolved, because it's also true that it's not always possible to get everything resolved. The way, like Youssoupha and James mentioned, the respect, the dignity, the fairness, the approach itself to go through this process already feels so good that even if the actual conflict doesn't get resolved, at least somebody listened to me, at least I could say what I had to say, and somebody tried to mediate or something like this. As we know, even from mediation, that's already helpful. But yeah, I wouldn't be able to give you the exact numbers, like James said, how much it costs, because I think sometimes we don't know for sure if it's just us or there were somebody who in one of the other resources helped equally. So
right. And Estelle, what about from Sanofi? You've only 12 days in or 18 days in. I'm sure you've thought about, what our measures of success look like. What's your thinking along those lines?
So hard to say in only 18 days, but obviously the success in the first month will be the number of visitors that we have for the office, right? Because we're in the launch phase, so we need also to communicate about it, to get it known, get it understood. So I think it's important when we will have the first visitors and the first feedbacks to see, and we already have a couple of visitors since, and I think so far the feedback is good on the launch at least. So that's going to be the first measurement of success, at least from our Ombuds office. And then we thought of some KPIs, high level KPIs to understand in the different countries, in our different functions, GBUs, to see if it's well spread and shared. And we thought also of potentially having some anonymous and voluntary satisfaction surveys to be sent to be able to improve our service and to be able to measure the satisfaction of the visitors of the help they've been receiving, of the trust they have in the Ombuds and the Ombuds office generally. So yeah.
Great, thanks. Youssoupha, do you have anything to add from your perspective in terms of sort of measures of success?
Yes, I do, and I like the topic because I'm coming from a medical background, statistical background. So I like measuring. Before being Ombuds, I used to be doing epidemiology and public health.
Right.
And we like measuring. So I'm still measuring. And I believe that we can measure. I believe that we can measure a lot. First of all, if you look at the Ombuds services in the UN, it's not just about case management. We perform other functions by the mandate. The mandate has given 3 pillars. One is about cases. Second is about systemic issues and how much we can be agent of change. It's happened in some cases that we've been able to make a big shift in progress in systemic issues. And the third one is more about outreach and skill building. And if you look at those 3 dimensions, you can measure. You can measure qualitatively, you can measure sometimes quantitatively. And if you look at also mediation, you can measure, because this is a process where you have a start and an end, right? It's opposite to other processes where the start is not clear, the end is not clear, you don't see back the visitors. But here you have a start and an end. So there we can also measure. So there are places where we can measure. There are measurement of process itself, and that's often what we're using to get budget, because the budget asks for data. What have you done? So we give some process indicators. We have trained many people. We have this, that. We have more and more visitors. I don't like to talk about cases. I most often talk about utilization rate, how much people are utilizing this mechanism that is put in place by the organization. And we can see some progress there, where our utilization rate is moving from X number to a plus. But we also have some very quantitative success, not satisfaction, but mostly success. As you said, Judith, when people are happy, sometimes the case is not resolved, but they're happy with the process. And sometimes they can tell you because they've been heard at least somewhere. We have a success rate in terms of time to handle the case. And that was also one of the reasons why the services was created, because in this formal system, it would go for many months and many years sometimes. While in the mediation, we could resolve it in a very short duration. So yes, there are indicators, and this way to really measure the process, the impact, and the outcome of what we are doing with regard to the mandate that we receive.
Great, thanks. And James, maybe finally on this big picture stuff before we move to look at individual cases and how those work through. You know commercial mediation, and you've seen mediation working in a commercial context. When you moved into the Ombuds space, what struck you about the difference in sort of the design of the overall process, the model, if you like, that was useful or you thought was works really well to be effective in making a successful Ombuds service?
Great. Thanks, James. Let me just do a little parentheses here and acknowledge Mary Rowe and Jim Lee, as Judith quite rightly did at the start, because they've written and thought about these issues, and I've benefited tremendously from them. So I think for me, what's been maybe surprising is how the mediation skills that I learned have been applicable to all kinds of resources that we offer, not just to mediation services. I think we'll come on to this, but we do more than just mediate. We do conflict coaching. Sometimes we do some internal diplomacy, and many of the skills, the active listening, the asking challenging questions, asking questions, these kind of things have really come to bear in many of the different services that we offer. And maybe following up, I think Youssoupha gave a great overview of ways we can think about measuring success. Just for our office in particular, we do look at numbers. So for 2023, we had about 565 cases. That was about a 23% increase from the previous year. 2023 also for mediation, we had 191 cases that were brought to us as requests for mediation. About, I think, 97 became mediations, and the success rate was something like 85%. So we do also look at numbers when trying to analyze success, and we also do, as Judith mentioned, circulate surveys. Estelle mentioned circulate surveys to get feedback. So we do also take this seriously, and of course, those numbers, they don't reveal the whole story, but I think they are a good start.
Great. That's maybe a nice segue then into maybe looking at handling the disputes themselves, the conflicts, or maybe you don't even call them conflicts or disputes, but that's something we can pick up later, the use of language. But maybe it would be just useful to map out for everybody how broadly a case would run through your services. Are there differences? Are they handled the same way? So Judith, do you want to just start and just describe what a typical journey of a case would be in your context?
Yes, sure. So at any given day, we don't know what's going to be the day look like. I think that's sort of true in this profession. So cases come in through WhatsApp, Teams, email, phone calls, walk-ins. So there are a number of different ways people can reach out. I think in the beginning, like Estelle said, this website outreach and all that is critical. Having a charter agreement is critical because that also set up our boundaries and in a way protection for us, for the office. So any given time I receive a case, I will acknowledge it within at least immediately 24 hours or maximum 48 hours. So talking about efficiency, I think for it is critical. Even I'm a one-person office, but I think this kind of immediate acknowledgement is very important, and it's not an automated response. It's not you could set up a calendar through an automated thing. I really believe that the human touch, even anyway, the artificial intelligence, we don't go into that now, but the human touch is really important, even though the machines can do a lot these days. So the first thing, what I do differently, I will say how we are supposed to do it all the time. We're supposed to say to the visitor immediately, what are the 4 principles of this, meaning that it is confidential, our role is impartial, we don't take sides, this is informal, off the record, we don't have any decision-making authority, and the office is independent. The reason I decided over the years not to follow this immediately, because I feel the humility is super important. For most people, it takes huge amount of courage and time to think about whether should I contact the ombudsperson or not. The perception is still that the ombudsperson is only for the most, I don't know, highest level of issues. And I try to say that this is come for a cup of tea and the chat. This could be the best place to start as early as possible, but often that's the perception. And the reason I don't start me talking, I want them to start saying what's the reason they came and who are they. And so we in a way just do a little introduction, and then I listen to them first. I feel this humble approach is important, at least for me. It resonates with the way I think our only skill is the use of self in this job, but there's no prescriptive way. And then exploring options and conflict coaching and mediation and so on and so forth.
Right.
Referrals or just listening. 99.9% of our work is about listening. And this is
so you're normalizing the conversational aspects away from the formality and the principles, which I guess are all there and underpin it. But what you're really emphasizing is the conversation. Look, this is a chat over a coffee or a tea.
This is the relationship aspect first, and then I will always find a way to introduce myself and say all those principles and to explain how we work and how it is different than all that. I just don't start right in the very beginning as a sort of like, this is, I just doesn't feel right for me, but that's just me. I will say the International Ombuds Association trains everyone that you start immediately with that. So this is a disclaimer, but everything from reframing the issues, but mostly listening. And often when the visitor comes, they think they know why they came. And within 20, 30 minutes, it turns out not really clear about what are the issues. So even just spending kind of long hours at times when needed. And then the next step will happen is that I will ask the permission, can I contact the other party? And depending if the visitor gives me this permission, then I contact the other party. And then depending on the case, it's really case by case. It's not 2 cases are the same almost, even though I've been doing this now 13 years, this work. It's likely always there are different contexts, different things that needs. And so I will listen very much to the needs. And then if I don't have the permission to contact anyone, it's a one-on-one coaching or conflict in a way to transfer as much of the skills as possible so they can then on their own manage what they need to manage in their life. And the transformative mediation, just one more last thing, mediation approach was important because I really don't want to be the one who gives advice, who decides things for them. So I'm really there to facilitate the conversation, and I want them to come up with the solution. or if they don't want to have an agreement at the end, that's fine. So that's how I would describe.
Right. So you're emphasizing the multiple routes through the possible conflict. James, do you want to add anything here at this point in terms of how it unfolds where you are?
I think Judith was pretty thorough. She described the process that I use exactly. Some of the services that she identified, maybe I'll just mention them again. One would be we can offer mediation services, like the traditional mediation, bringing people together in person or online, and having a synchronous mediation, everyone in the same room mediation. We can offer asynchronous mediation, so moving between people, communicating between people to try and find solutions. We can do a kind of internal diplomacy, which is, contacting various people within our networks to try and find ways to resolve problems. And importantly, though, I love mediation and I would like to, mediate all the time. I'm finding increasingly that there's a lot of value in empowering visitors to help themselves through things like conflict coaching. So just talking with the visitor about, a difficult conversation they're going to have with their supervisor, for example, talking through that with them, asking them questions, helping them to think through practical things like when are they going to have the conversation, where are they going to have the conversation, what are they going to emphasize, what shouldn't they say, what should they say. I think there's a whole lot of value in that as well.
Right. Youssoupha, do you agree with that and anything to add?
I totally agree, and I think totally doing the same like James and Judith to empower people. We are in the last 2 years trying to do more coaching because one part is to be empowered and to resolve themselves the disagreement, because we believe that conflict is a community dimension and community, that needs to involve the community rather than to be solved through a bureaucracy. And the offices are bureaucracy. I come from a culture where conflict is resolved by the community, right? In West Africa, I come from a culture where informality is so important in resolving conflict. You said normalizing, but I would say humanizing. Humanizing the relationship is so important for us. And compared to the IOA and the US approach of formalizing even the informal system, it's become a problem for us. We just keep it informal.
Right. And thanks, Youssoupha. And Estelle, I granted it's only a new service, but what are some of the principles of the process that you tried to set up?
Yeah, so for us in process, what can be a bit different from what you have in your organizations is that we give the possibility of the employee to choose the ombud person they feel more comfortable with. So we provide the profiles of the different ombuds with short videos of them presenting themselves and their passions or who they are. And when an employee wants to reach out to an ombuds, they can give a preference if they have the name or if they have a preference, for example, for a female ombuds, or they don't have a preference, they can say it as well. And so that's a way also for us to empower the employees and to give them a choice. And once that is done, we are 3 people in the Ombuds office. So at central level, we do not work on the Ombuds cases. So we're not really Ombuds. We're basically handling and working on the Ombuds office. And we allocate the cases to the Ombuds. So generally, if someone has a preference, we will give it to the person that they have selected, unless the person is absent for holidays or cannot take a case right now because of workload or something like that. So that's a little bit of the difference that we have in the process. And I think for the rest is fairly similar to what was explained. And what we ask ultimately just for KPIs and kind of monitoring the service is for our ombuds to feel very simple final information once they have resolved or once they have finalized working on a particular matter. They will just confirm the overall type of issue or type of topic that was brought to them, how many hours it took them to resolve, how many meetings they had, with how many people they interacted, and the type of resolution that they have used. So for the moment, we have no closed case. So that's, in theory, what we have planned. But yeah.
Right. We'll come back in a year and see what the results are looking like, maybe. Great. So maybe if we can now move to thinking more specifically about the handling of cases and the skills required to do that. I'm going to start with Estelle. I mean, Estelle, you talked about not coming from a sort of ombuds or a dispute background and coming into this new. I mean, and now you're being through the mediator training and you understand that. What surprised you about the importance of the mediator skill set for the resolution of this types of disputes?
Yeah, so for us, it was very important to have the right people for this job with the right skills and the right training. Reason why we very early in the process we really thought that the training was essential. We could have people internally who had some mediation training or were experienced employees in human resources and could have some experience as well in mediation. But we felt that there was a need to have a more structured training on skills that are needed for the ombuds role specifically. Reason why we partner with CEDR in building and shaping a very tailored training for our ombuds office and our needs. And I think that the skills that are really important, obviously, are dispute resolution, mediation, facilitation skills. Where we need employees to be really comfortable with dealing with conflicts and emotional situations. But also what are the skills which are important for us is organizational knowledge and networking skills, because the ombuds need to have a very solid understanding of the organization. And for Sanofi, we're a very big organization, 90,000 employees, almost in a lot of different countries. So, and the organization is changing very fast. So we need people also who have that understanding, knowledge to be able to guide employees in this changing environment. And I think then also the communication skills and problem-solving skills are crucial. How to be a good active listener, how to be flexible, be diplomatic, collaborative. So I think these are part of the key skills, and I think the how we assess those skills was mainly in the selection process. We decided to go through a very thorough selection process. So we published an internal offer for the employees to be part of the Ombuds office. And then we interviewed the employees with role plays with CEDR professionals present and doing the role plays in order to assess those skills and to see how they react in a realistic situation of conflict. So yeah, I think these are really the crucial skills, and I thought that the training was amazing because it's a very practical training that we gave them, with a lot of role playing and case studies where they could practice in almost real life, working on issues that were Sanofi type of issues, very close to our reality. So
right, great. So does anyone else want to add anything in terms of the core usefulness of mediator type skills? And I guess from James and Judith, both your backgrounds, you've mediated in different contexts. Youssoupha as well has experience in conflict. Do you guys want to add any comments on the sort of general principle?
I would say just one difference, because in terms of the voluntary participation, I think that makes it a little bit different, that at least in the way I practiced so far everywhere, it's been voluntary. So sometimes that makes it difficult to actually get the mediation done, because if one party doesn't want to come to the table at that time, then we have to find different ways, of course, to work together, which we do, but that's the only thing I would add.
Right. Anything else on that? Then maybe bringing in now to thinking get specifics, and Youssoupha, I'm going to ask you to lead on this you've mentioned already some aspects of this, but the importance of relationship skills, the building of the relationships with the person, and I think we'll come to the use of language, what you call them visitors or the language. How important is those relationship skills in being able to facilitate a path through to resolution here?
It's very important. It's quite critical, but also very challenging, mostly in the organization context. In commercial mediation, we may have less challenge on that than we being here, being part of the community, being part of the organization, even for many years, socializing with people on a daily basis, sometimes even sharing the corridor and the restaurant. I was in peacekeeping for many years. We've been sharing very difficult conditions. We become more than friends. Sometimes it becomes difficult in that sense to navigate and to manage relationship and to use it in the professional ways in the mediation in both sides. Sometimes there are broken relationships and you as a mediator now you want to facilitate while you've been somewhere involved in that broken relationship or perceived. I remember one day someone came to see me and told me I had an issue, wanted to come to see you, but it took me 6 months before I come to see you, because I thought that you are very close to my supervisor, because you are all coming from the same country, and I've seen you one day talking to him in your local language. It took me 6 months to realize that in fact you are not friends. So it can play to prevent people to use the mediation service, but in terms of in the mediation process itself, I think it's very critical. Because I do believe that you cannot direct people to problem solving if you don't connect with them. And there's nothing more powerful than relationships through empathy that allows people to connect as human beings and to facilitate the problem solving or the resolution process. So I use a lot of connections through empathy, connecting at the person itself, not the staff or not the colleague in terms of the bureaucracy nomenclatura. I also use a lot of listening, active listening, but talking also, because you cannot just listen. It's important sometimes, because sometimes the silence makes people uncomfortable and break the relationships. And something I found important also in the relationship is the patience. Is to be patient. I found that in the context of the workplace, it takes some time. It's an up and down. Things are not linear, and it takes some patience sometimes to get to the bottom of the issue or to the resolution. And very important also in the relationship, from my experience, is a consistency, to be consistent, because of the context in which we are, because of the social bound we have, because of the perception, because of the rumors. Sometimes it's very difficult to keep that consistency, and that's our bigger challenge. And that's why when I was in Secretariat, we've been discussing about ombuds being in the same duty station for many years, like for 10 years, in the same duty station, in the same office, the same community. And there was situation where it become an issue. You need to be consistent when you want to be the one facilitating between the two parties, right? So those for me have been very important in building, but also maintaining the relationships through the process. And that process sometimes can be very long. Hopefully it is short, but there are situations where it was very long.
Great, thank you. And James, what about you? I mean, you saw sort of relationship building in the context of commercial disputes. What struck you as different, and how have you had to apply relationship skills building differently in the ombuds context?
I think a lot of it's the same. I think it's the same core skills about active listening, asking questions, taking time to build trust, not rushing things. I think what Youssoupha said about patience resonates a lot. That's one perhaps difference. Something else, and this doesn't exclude commercial cases, but I think cultural sensitivity is really important in a big organization like ours. And so we take steps to try and account for that. It's a hard thing to account for. You can't know every culture and the nuances. But for example, and this will follow on something that Estelle said earlier, one thing that we've done is we've created a global panel of mediators, so that when people come to us, of course, most of us on our core team are trained mediators, but if people come to us and they want a particular profile for a mediator, they want someone who's a man or a woman who speaks a particular language, or who's from a particular part of the world, we have mediators who are carefully vetted that we can offer to them. So that's, I think cultural sensitivity is something that's really important. And I really was interested to hear about Estelle's videos of the different ombuds, and in a different way, we've tried to we've tried to be culturally sensitive in the mediation context by making sure that the visitors have options beyond just our core team.
Right. And I guess one thing which is similar to all of in all your organizations is that you are dealing with people who may be a number of people in different locations as well. Is that right? Who may not be all in one place. Estelle, you touched on it for Sanofi, but I guess the same for, in terms of process then, and when you're trying to manage and chart a path from, people being in disagreement or in conflict to finding a resolution, what process interventions are you using in order to help people have those conversations and move towards settlement? Maybe Judith, do you want to just kick off on that?
Yes, sure. So just going back, I think we might have repeated a little bit, hinted a few of these things. So it's not something rocket science in a way, but it still works all the time, is to listen to everyone. Listening is number one. We said active listening, all listening, like every possible way. But to be providing a process where they feel they can safely contribute, they feel heard. And so sometimes it takes, like Youssoupha said, it takes long time. One meeting can last way longer than any usual business meeting, and that's okay with me. So I try as much as possible to provide ample of time to everyone, and sometimes I usually do a lot of preparatory work. I talk to all the parties as much as possible. If I don't have the permission, then I only talk to the visitor. That is not a client, is the visitor. But at times I have the opportunity to reach out to others, and I almost always try to find ways to give feedback to the most senior leadership. It's mostly about the systemic issues, like Youssoupha also mentioned. But at times when I don't have the permission to intervene and contact the other party or set up a mediation or facilitated conversation or go between the parties or none of these, or group, sometimes I end up being approached by an entire group, which is a whole other question of how we process that. And there are many aspects of that, but maybe not to take up too much of the time here. I think this upward feedback or finding ways to maybe hypothetically raise the issue just so that we can truly be an early prevention, even for risk mitigation. I think this is very critical. We cannot just focus on the cases. We have a huge opportunity to intervene and find processes, whether it's just a very informal check-in with the leaderships, but do it regularly. I do it quite regularly in different ways. I'm also required with the Secretary General to have regular meetings, but I find ways to give feedback and propose changes or make recommendations throughout the year verbally. The annual report is just another topic on its own, but verbally throughout the year as it comes to, so that it's both with the visitors and the parties and the leadership. it's a combination of including as much as possible everyone in this. And maybe I will just mention very briefly one process that was super exciting for me, because I graduated in organization development in 2007. And this was the first time. We always say Ombuds is a change agent, but often it becomes, we make recommendations, we review policies, we give different change initiatives. But this process became, I used the appreciative inquiry after the Black Lives Matter and in the midst of COVID, the beginning of COVID, and it became a secretariat-wide change initiative. So this was super exciting to see it from the start, and now it's in the implementation phase. And I had to make sure that since I'm the only ombuds person, that I'm as much as possible is just a facilitator or whatever we call coordinating the whole thing. But this process of appreciative inquiry on inclusion, it became an inclusion journey, we call now. It was something that started out just for the need to create a bigger space for these dialogues, and it blossomed into an organization-wide process in 4 languages with the entire secretariat. So that was maybe an unusual and wonderful experience.
Right. So you're emphasizing in terms of process, not only the responsibility to resolve individual disputes, but how that feeds into driving systemic change in an organization, which I think Youssoupha had mentioned as well. Does anyone else want to comment on sort of process interventions that they find effective in terms of facilitating the individual conflict?
I think it's difficult to follow Judith because she's so thorough in answering these questions. But maybe one other thing that occurs to me is that we can often do important work in channeling people within the system to the right people. And what I have in mind here is if someone comes to us and they express that they're having some, mental health issues, then hopefully we know someone that we can refer them on to. If they're having legal questions, then we know who we can refer them on to. So I think another important service that we can offer is helping people find the right people to talk to, given the specifics of the situation they're facing.
Great, thanks, James. Youssoupha, Estelle, anything else to add on that aspect?
I will add just one dimension. We do a lot of team interventions, team mediation and team interventions. And if you can see from my background, we are running a mediation campaign currently, where many of these campaigns are done through teams. We are very small teams in our ombuds offices, 1 handful or 2 handful of people, but we have 20,000, 50,000 people to cover. Often it's more effective when we address groups and teams. So that's something I have found very, very useful. We've been running last week, and we're going to do it again. Some cafes, some mediation cafes, where informally we convene the community to talk about mediation. It allows people to have a space to talk. It allows us also to know about their experience and their perspective. And we raise those issues up, as Judith said, so the leadership to take into consideration what people are thinking on the offices when they design policies or they design processes. So we'll just add that team dimension and community dimension in processes we are using.
Awesome. So in addition to the individual dispute and the systemic, you've got that middle bit, which is about teams who may be affected by the conflict. That's great.
Right.
Thank you. So maybe moving finally, we've talked about the relationship skills and process interventions. James, maybe I can ask you to kick off on this one. Obviously, you've got to help facilitate the settlement and move parties from a point where they are perhaps in dispute to, able to reach some form of agreement. And you're dealing with often, I imagine, quite sensitive issues of people's employment and workplace, and they feel strongly about that. So how do you help them negotiate their way through that to find a settlement? Are there any key reflections you have from that side of things?
Thank you for the question. I think absolutely we deal with a lot of sensitive cases, a lot of cases of interrelational problems, people concerned about career progression, people being separated from the organization, and then in a minority of cases, people are raising issues of allegations of misconduct, for example. So yeah, I think for everyone, these issues are quite sensitive, and I think to me that just emphasizes the importance of building trust with our office. I think that's the most critical piece. And I think a really important part of that is something we've discussed already, which is confidentiality. So I think we probably all think a lot about confidentiality, just in terms of meeting with people, reassuring them that what they're telling us is confidential, reassuring them the fact they're even meeting with us is confidential, but then also thinking structurally about assuring that, the documents that we receive, our written communications, all of those things, we're taking confidentiality into consideration. So I think confidentiality is a really important piece toward resolution, because with confidentiality, the visitors feel comfortable, and then they trust our services, and then I think things move in the right direction from there.
And Estelle, well, in terms of the types of cases that you anticipate having, and in the early days, what thoughts do you have in terms of what you think is going to be needed to help people move towards settlement?
Again, it's hard to know what we're going to get as type of cases, but what we think we're going to get is a lot of conflicts and difficulties in our understanding the changes in the organization. So I think really this will be the core of our service to help people navigate through the organization. We have a lot of good initiatives, but the issue is for people to understand what's the difference between this and that and this service, and who to go to, and what would be the best approach. So that's really also the focus also that we gave to our ombuds team, is being that guidance into explaining what are the different options available within the company, what would be the pros and cons and of each option, and ultimately help them pick their best option for that particular problem. So, we think sometimes people may have some very serious and very sensitive matters that they don't feel comfortable reaching out to the Speak Up helpline for some reason. So we want really the ombuds to give a space to understand what are the triggers, what are the issues, why they don't feel comfortable, how they could feel more comfortable reaching out, and how we can facilitate that. Because ultimately what we want is the problem to be solved and not reappear again, or not recur. So that's really what we believe we'll be having as type of issues.
Right. So you see your ombuds as having a role on sort of, and you mentioned earlier, I think, was about understanding, the organizational knowledge a bit more, to where need be to help people understand particular initiatives, but also, I guess, where they might go in terms of channels to get more information, more help, and more assistance, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Great. And Judith and Youssoupha, anything to add on this topic in terms of, the facilitating the settlement, dealing with the types of disputes that you're seeing?
I would just add one thing, what is humanly quite challenging being one person, a solo practitioner, and the little things that come throughout the life cycle of a case. We have different meetings. One thing that for me is important is little things like this. I don't accept coffee from anyone or lunch because otherwise it can get so complicated. Staying impartial and facilitating any kind of resolution, that just to add, this is like a very little thing, but it has been helpful.
So that's about the perception of neutrality, right? And I guess in the context when although you're independent, you're within an organization. Youssoupha, you mentioned earlier on, talking in with a colleague in a local language, perception of neutrality. I guess that's a battle that we all have to face constantly in your professional context.
It's not great for our social lives, James.
No coffees, no lunches, but a very rewarding role in other aspects, I'm sure.
I just wanted to add something on that, James, on the negotiation side, because I've been mostly doing negotiation before joining Ombudsing. I was my last experience was in Haiti on kidnappings, and I was mostly negotiating at that time. So when I moved to the mediation side, I have this concern, and I've seen in the experience, mostly in the UN, you end up in situation of mediation where both parties are not prepared the same, really. You may have some what we call affiliated workforce or very junior staff, sometimes mason, sometimes very low in terms of skills and trainings. And then you may have the administration on the other side coming with the whole machinery of legal advice, legal people. What I found very useful was to train parties, not just to coach them, but to train parties so that they can at least get those skills that allows them to be better negotiators and to be partners in the relationship and to reduce the gap of power in the interactions. And I have the power flip chart in my room always for that, because I always anticipate that there should be a need to train one of the parties at least, so that they go to the negotiation table, to the mediation table, negotiation table with some good skills, to negotiate.
So you're providing them with the negotiation training and then
Correct.
getting them to apply that into the actual conflict that you're working with them on.
Absolutely, because I can anticipate on their needs being before in the negotiation side. I can anticipate on their needs on that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I heard someone else in a labor relations context where it was trade unions versus management in a mine, for example, where he did that. He would train them in negotiation, and then they would enter into the discussions and facilitate, and that worked very well.
The problem, James, is that we have very small teams, and sometimes we end up doing 2 or 3 things that we may not be doing the same, right? If we had a big team, we may have different people to play those roles. The ambiguity in our context is that sometimes you become ombuds, you become a trainer, you become a mediator in the same case.
Yeah, your people of multi-talents, obviously. Judith, you wanted to come in here.
Yeah, just a clarification on the coffees. I will say that I'm the one who will have a lot of coffees and reach out and lunch, but I just pay for myself. That's only to clarify.
Great, thank
you. It's important to get the data as much as possible from different ways, because otherwise we are really clueless what's going on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Great. Well, we're coming to the end, and just two things I wanted to cover. First question was to you, in terms of the end users, the people who are using your service, what is the sort of feedback from them in terms of their perceptions of the value add of an Ombuds service? Maybe Judith, do you want to start first on that?
Yeah, usually it's the appreciation that the office exists, because they don't know who they could talk to, where they could go if this would not be there. And I hear that through people say, like, I heard about this service from others. So there's a lot of this word of mouth, even though I've been doing somewhat of the outreach even online during COVID, but as I said, it's a one-person office at the moment. So like Youssoupha said, we can only do so much. That's definitely a value added. And it is different. Like always, we would highlight how we are different from the other resources.
So it's about having somewhere to go where perhaps something didn't exist before. Youssoupha, from your perspective?
Well, the things I found always fascinating is that people in a conflict, in very difficult conflict, and sometimes very, like they get terminated, it's very, very important, very, very, very severe. When they come in a very depressed mood, and after 1 hour in the session, they start to have a smile. And one told me just a month ago, I would never imagine that I will be smiling in this meeting, and I will end up having to laugh. I think that's the first, for me, that's always the first positive feedback I capture from people. And they come back to that normality, be able to manage their emotions and to, to be empowered and to be able to smile and to be able to go back to who they are. Now we have many feedbacks on how they could restore their relationship with the other party. Many feedbacks also on how issues who've been there for many years and become very entrenched and could be resolved through a limited number of interventions and facilitations. People are very appreciative. People are very appreciative also when we restore social justice. We go on missions, and when we go on missions, and they've been sometimes desperate, and through our intervention, they get hurt, and we restore the offices restore some normalcy in the processes, and we get feedback on that too. So yeah, there are very positive feedback that we are using currently in our mediation campaign to also share those feedback to the community so that people can see the value, the added value.
Great, thanks. James, anything to add?
Not really. Pretty much the same. I've been surprised how many times a visitor will come to the office and they're ready to start a war and they're thinking about formal dispute resolution. And then after a 90-minute conversation, they see the situation much differently and they're much calmer and they're thinking more about, informal resolution or trying to repair relationships.
Yeah, so it's seeing that transition from people in distress, in stress, through to smiling or seeing a way forward and having it resolved. And Estelle, what sort of outcomes are you hoping to see from Sanofi and from your service?
So yeah, what we're already listening and hearing from employees reaching out is thank you for giving us a time to just listen to us, because I think everyone is so busy, the workload is enormous everywhere, and just giving that space is already a very good outcome, and they're thankful for that. So I think the recognition for the moment is there, not necessarily on the resolution because we didn't get there yet, but the feedback is really good on the launch of the project. We had over 200 people applying to be ombuds. So it means that, there is a lot of interest in this and helping others. So I think that's also a very good feedback that we receive.
Yeah, I guess in the context of the modern world where we're all used to talking in our own echo chambers, right? And no one's really listening. A service like all of yours where people actually are trained to listen, which has been emphasized throughout the day, throughout this conversation, is really important. So I can see how that could be valuable. So we're coming to the end, and I'm just going to ask one final question for each of you, which is really to think about, if you could just give one tip for anyone who's thinking about running an ombuds service or being an ombuds, one tip to think about and being effective in that role of resolving these quite difficult conflicts. And I think, Estelle, we're going to start with you from your experience to date.
To be passionate about it. I think that's the trigger, to build a strong program and a true program is to really believe in it. So I think that's the advice I would give.
Awesome, great, thank you, James.
I think for me, clearly communicating what we do is really, really important for a successful program. There are a lot of, I think, misunderstandings about what we do. And I think if everyone's clear about what we do, then more people will use our services. And I think that could be just presentations describing the services that we offer and why they might benefit visitors. But, it can also be through more creative means. This is something I think Youssoupha mentioned earlier, doing trainings on dispute resolution, different ways of having, for example, difficult conversations, advice about having difficult conversations. And those are ways to build trust with the office. And then in the context of those trainings, we can also take time to explain what we do. So I think that's really important, being very clear about what we do. I think that opens the door to cases.
Right. And Judith?
I would say probably to be mindful of how we are perceived, how the office is perceived, and how throughout the multiple different things that can happen in terms of impartiality, independence from the management perspective, from the staff perspective, like just being mindful of all of those perceptions and to be true to fairness and all these principles of confidentiality, impartiality, and so on.
Great, thank you. And finally, Youssoupha, any tip from you?
Listen, I will say professionalize it. Professionalize the function because it's a full-time job. There's a lot of added value, but there's also risk for harm if it is not done. It's be professional case, really professionalize it.
Right. So this is a serious role which needs, professionals doing it in a professional way.
Right.
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 Well, that's a wonderful point to probably to close on. And thank you all very much for your time and your insights. I found it useful and insightful, and I hope others who watch this do as well. So thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James.